want everything to work. All right. According to everything I see on the internet right now, I think we are live. I'm going to go over real quickly and check the YouTube page. All right. Yeah, I think we are live. Everybody else seeing what they need to see? All right. Okay. Let's see if we've got some people coming in to see us here. A view on YouTube. Sorry, I'm just getting it right. Okay. I'm going to mute all my other channels just to make sure everything is visible. And one last little thing. Okay, we are definitely live and we are working. Okay, so for everybody out there who might be catching up to us, I am John Bingham and I am in sales and marketing at Bad Cat. Why don't we go around the horn and introduce some people here? We've got Peter, who is the engineer and the CEO behind all of the new Bad Cat stuff.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Yep, and we got Nate and Nash from Palin Music.
Hey!
And we've got Kyle Rowe from the Bad Cat. Do we call it the Bad Cat community? What do we call it?
Yeah, the Bad Cat community or the Bad Cat page.
The Bad Cat page. Fair enough. Anyways, today was an amazingly super high stress day loaded with all sorts of things that had to be done to launch our latest creation, which is the Jet Black. And it was a lot of work, but man, oh man, it's good. I see all the comments and everything on all the videos, and I'm just like, oh, this is great. Really, really good. So this was directly out of Peter's creation.
Yeah, I mean, it always starts off like, oh, come on, we're just going to do here this little thing, and we're going to do a little change, and then we might have a cool addition to our product line, and then it ends up in like, maybe you want to do a little bit more, maybe we want to change this and that, and then it spirals out of control.
Yeah.
This is usually the process, but I mean, I'm saying that as if that would be something negative. In fact, that is the best part of the job, and it's still the reason why. I mean, I think I can speak for all of us why we're doing this, because this business is a little crazy, but at the same time, it's just fun.
So you're saying that we don't get into this business to get rich?
I mean, I'm still hoping. Let's put it that way.
Right. Exactly. Hey, Brett Petrusik, what's up, man? Brett from Premier Guitars in the room.
Oh, hey, Brett.
Hey, Brett. Yeah, baby. Yeah. So I want to just because I think it's kind of a funny story. Funny's the wrong word, but to give people like the history on this amp, it's funny how it started, because I think it really started from a different place, and it started from I don't want to say it started from a bad place at all. It didn't. It just ended up in a different place. So basically, I remember one day saying like, man, the Black Cat's really killing it. We should make one that's twice the power and give the rockers a chance to play a Bad Cat, or I mean the Black Cat. But like you were like, yeah, all right, we'll give it a try. And then you did something with it, and it came out, and it didn't sound really like a Black Cat. Go ahead.
That was what I was just alluding to. It's like this approach of having another product to the line which makes sense, but is based on something else. Usually when I start this process, it immediately, my mind goes to, okay, so what was it what bothered me about this last design? Because there are always things. It's not, I mean, I can't say here, well, this is like perfect what I'm putting out. It's like a snapshot in time, like when you're making a record or when you're producing a song. Afterwards, you're often like, oh, when I would do that today, I actually would change this or that. It's still good that you have the snapshot in time, because that was like a representation of what was at the time. But you want to move forward, right? And with the Jet Black, that was another one of these stories where as soon as I started working on it, I kind of went off trail, so to speak, and explored some other stuff. So, hey, Michael.
And
hey, guys.
Michael.
Hey.
Wow.
Hi.
Hey,
Mike.
hi.
Can I introduce you to some people?
Please do.
All right. And the two gentlemen in frame would be Nate and Nash over at
Hey,
Palin
guys.
Music in the Midwest. They've got how many stores are you guys up to? You've been growing like a weed. 10 stores? How many this year alone?
Wow.
So we opened, let's see, St. Louis, Overland Park, Kansas, Wichita. What am I leaving out?
I think that does it.
Yeah, so 3. I mean, that was plenty.
That's pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Overland
I've
Park.
watched,
too.
lots of Nate playing guitar videos. Amazing player.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I'm going to hug you.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yes, I think we can all second that. I mean, it's like, yeah.
Yeah. And let me introduce you to Kyle Rowe. Kyle manages the Bad Cat Facebook group.
Oh,
Kyle,
hi,
this is Michael Nielsen. Michael Nielsen manages, or shouldn't manage, he owns Big Hairy Guitars, the YouTube channel, one of my absolute favorites. If you're not familiar with Big Hairy Guitars, go and watch it.
I don't think I am.
Oh yeah, dude,
Yeah, please do.
like Michael is no slouch. You also do audio. What's it called? Audio Ninja. Your
my real company that
yeah. What's your audio company called?
It's called Ninja Tracks.
Right.
Ninja Tracks, and we
Ninja
do
Tracks.
scoring for movies, TV, video games, trailers.
Oh, that's awesome.
All kinds of stuff.
I always forget when I watch like one of Michael's videos and I see like this 3-minute song at the beginning of the video, and I'm like, how does he do that in a week? Like, I would spend weeks and weeks trying to make the song, but then I forget that you actually do scoring. You actually know music. You're not just a guitar player.
Yeah, the writing part is my actual job.
Yeah.
Playing guitar is the work. That I have to work at. Writing is the easier part.
That's fantastic.
The playing part, I wish I was like Nate and could just go, and it flows out in this beautiful stream of gorgeousness.
Right, all the feels.
Yeah.
You guys are sweet. Thank you. I love you. I get
Mine goes like this. Mine goes pause, rewind, punch, pause, rewind, punch.
Well, I have to tell you, Nash does all the audio for our videos, and also I'm just going to talk about you. I'm going to brag about you a little bit.
Do it.
Nash is a buyer in our company, category buyer for guitars and amps, and so John, I saw your email about Jet Black whenever you sent it out, and you're like, hey, we got this new thing coming. And Nash immediately dives into the specs. And so when he dives into the specs, that sort of, informs kind of the direction that we're taking. And without derailing the conversation we're on right now, Peter was just talking about, and I love this about you, Peter, and John has said this before about you. You're always tinkering. You know what I mean? You're George Lucas in there. You're like, we got to get some more aliens over here. You know what I mean? You're always wanting to, take it to the next level, right? Yeah. And what's interesting, that was a Star Wars reference, by the way. I don't know if you caught that. Moving on. Anyway, but what's interesting about that is that I love the fact that the tinkering and the changing and the modifying and just the desire to, improve this one little thing ends up exponentially growing. And then here comes the Jet Black, right? And so whenever we were doing the demo for this, and we were just talking about it on paper, the first question was like, is this just a souped up Black Cat?
Of course.
And then Nash gets into the specs of it all. And here I am circling back around to talking about this amp. But it ends up being the way that it informs that demo, because we really wanted to showcase the clean, and showcase the, the trim and the verb that is, a digital verb and an, analog trim kind of living in harmony together. And so anyway, all that to say this is I could not do what I do were it not for this guy. And you can't see Charlie Parker over here, but Charlie Parker, he is our director of media services.
Oh, nice.
Puts together all the videos, and he's literally working on a video right now, quasi paying attention to us. So anyway, thank you guys for having us. We are honored and thrilled to be here.
Well,
Awesome.
we're so happy to have you, because I think actually you are such a great team in terms of how you're presenting this. And Nash, I agree. You always have it. You have it all down. I mean, man, it's impressive. I think you have a huge knowledge about guitar amps and all that stuff. That's amazing.
I came into this whole business like kind of backwards. So I started off as the nerdy like forum guy who was just sitting and asking like these older dudes questions all the time. Like, what about this? What if I switch these tubes out? What's that going to sound like? Just diving through the forums, and then later ended up becoming a live musician and got into this business. So I feel like I understand both sides of the equation. The people who are using these things in the context of live performances, and the people who are using these, in their bedroom and it's their hobby. And, I'm an engineer as well. So it's always interesting to see how this stuff translates in a room and how it translates live and how it translates onto a track when it's being recorded. And that was the big thing with this amp. We've done demos of the other amps as well. And, we found out pretty quickly when we were doing the demo of the Jet Black. And I say this to people all the time, but, with extra headroom, volume's not even really that big of the equation. It's the dynamics. It's how it responds. And we hit these amps with, every type of common pickup. So you can kind of get a sense of what your rig is going to sound like if you have this, in your arsenal. Yeah. And the Jet Black, it's definitely more, as you said, more than just, a little extra oomph. There's a different feel overall, and both of the channels respond pretty differently. So can you kind of give us some insight on what you tinkered with, minus obviously putting it on a lean protein meal?
The funny thing is, like, I go all the way in one direction, and then when I think, oh, I got it, and I go all the way back. And then I'm like, I don't know. I feel like something is totally wrong, and so I'm trying something else. And my guideline, so to speak, is just my inner my instinct. I'm constantly, so let's go back a little bit. I start obviously with a concept and a basic circuitry I have in mind. Of course, that is coming somewhere. Everything has been, no, not everything has been done, but the basis of these things have been done. So I developed that concept, put that all in the computer, do the PCB layout, and then at some point there comes the interesting part where I actually have a physical amp in front of me and I hear it for the first time. And it used to be with the first attempts that they were just when there was sound coming out of it, I was already happy. But nowadays, usually it kind of like it works out immediately. But of course, it doesn't sound like what I expect in the first place. So, and then the tinkering part, so to speak, starts. And this is where, as simple as these circuits may appear at first glance, it's still an infinite number of possibilities. So, and there comes a lot of experience, a lot of ear training, a lot of personal taste into play, that you end up with a circuit where you actually find that it's something unique. I actually always want to develop something unique. And at the same time, it is in the realm of what we expect from guitar amps, right? And my personal goal or is always more than what I think guitars should sound like once they are finished on the record, right?
Yes.
Because so often we have that effect that we have guitar sounds in mind, and then when we hear the actual amps, they don't live up to what we have in mind because we heard them on records, and that is obviously different, right? There's no right or wrong, as guitar sounds are just so subjective and a personal taste. But that's kind of like the general approach. I mean, I know I went totally off question. You were asking
not at all, honestly.
about
That's the part of it that's most interesting to me is like people's creative process, because I'm on the phone all day talking to different manufacturers, and they're pitching me ideas for their new products and stuff like that. And oftentimes I kind of use it as an opportunity to talk shop because I love that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see who will be working on a concept for a really long time without actually playing it out and about around town, giving it to bands, trying to record with it, versus real old school guys who are just sitting in the room by themselves, tinkering with things. And then they have a couple of trusty guitars, and a lot of it's, like you said, instinct. Like,
Yeah.
I just have the right feel for this, versus people who are coming up with kind of these high concepts on paper and then not really trying these amps out until like production is almost already started. So that's interesting. You said like you want your amps to sound like the finished product on the record, because so often something that may sound great in the room does not sound great on a recording, or does not sound great with prototypical microphones, because there's so many other components that come into play when you're talking about live sound. Like, are they using a 57? Are they using an i5? Like, what are they miking this with? That's going to change the way the amp responds in front of a house or on a record. So that part of it's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, we all know this effect that we dial in the sound and then we actually play it in a band, and all of a sudden we're like, okay, where am I? I can't hear myself, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is I think the most common story amongst guitarists. So, especially when they play in bands which have two guitars, right, or two guitarists. So, what I find often is there's at this point, or nowadays, there's kind of like a preconceived notion of, okay, well, that's just too much gain. I hear that so often. It's too much gain, and that
Guilty. Guilty. I'm
no,
one
I
of
mean,
them.
also the analysis of that of why don't I cut through the mix, and whereas it is not false in itself, but it's also not. It's not 100% right, because depending on how the gain is structured and the amp is structured, and if there is how the frequency response is, I would say weighted, right? That can also change. But we have that usually with classic sounds, like based on Marshalls, that they are pushed to a degree where the amp doesn't have enough air to breathe, I call that sort of thing, right? There is no actual dynamic going on, and that often squeezes everything or squishes everything together in a way that it doesn't cut through the mix anymore. So that is something I generally try to avoid in the first place. So yeah. I think in the Jet Black, I hope I obtained that in a way.
So I want to bring up something because I want to ask Michael and Nate this. So I think of course I'm biased because I work with you and was in the room when we were tuning some of this stuff, and I think it's incredible. But it's amazing to me how the Jet Black has taken on a different character, almost like a Jekyll and Hyde sort of a thing, depending on who the player is. And I know that I went to Nate and I went to Michael both when they were making videos, and I said, I want to try something a little different. I'll give you the spec sheets, but I don't want to dictate buzzwords and all this sort of stuff and be like, this is how you should do it. Like, play it, see what you really like, come up with your own thing, and it's a new thing. I wanted it to be not just a YouTube, like, oh, you got to try the new amp, everybody, and they all use the same words. I didn't want any of that. And I feel like it's really wild how what Nate comes out with and what Michael comes out with from the same amplifier sounds drastically different from each other, both in a way that's incredibly flattering.
Mm-hmm.
So curious, Mike, if you can talk a little bit about like where your head was when you did this.
Yeah, actually, today I went to Nate Nash's video, and first thing I was thinking, like, I wonder if it'll sound anything like what I was able to get out of it or what I was hearing from it. And it was like yes and no. The taste and the character was totally there, but it was a totally different approach. And I think one thing also is that you guys always have a great sounding video, and I think especially on combos, which is probably the worst translating thing I've heard on YouTube videos typically, is like someone will sit there on a combo and it's just like, I'm sure it sounds amazing where they're sitting, but it just, they're not getting it into a microphone, and you guys do that really well. So kudos.
I think a lot of like modern engineers, especially anything with gain, they've abandoned room mics. And for these demos, people need to know how important room mics are. You don't listen to an amp like this. You listen to it in a room. So you're shaping those close mics in a room mic. And personally, I think that's the only way to get an honest representation of an amp. Would I always do that on like records I've been mixing? No, but for these demos, I think people need to hear it like they would hear it in a room, which is not with their face up to the grill, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They need to hear it breathe. They need to hear the dynamics in an actual living space.
So I think I love that. And I think that's why there's a benefit to watching 10 videos on the same product. You get a nice breadth of stuff. My approach is a little different because I always start with working on the song, because it usually reveals, well, not in this case because John came over and we heard it before, but when I'm on my own with the amp, I start with the song because it reveals all the little idiosyncrasies of the amp. And you really have to get into that last 1% to get it to fit with drums and stuff like that. So then I really get intimate with the character of the amp on that. The Jet Black has the potential to have an insane amount of high end and presence. And so if it's like a hi-fi clarity that comes out. But that's also something that for me, I hear in some like Class A amps, EL84 amps is probably part of that character, that glassy high end. But it's also part of the reason why it has such amazing clarity. And because they were able to, Peter was able to dial in body on it as well. Sometimes this kind of amp will end up being just so scooped, but because there's body on it, well, you get that dynamic hit, and you get that glassy clarity at the top. And I just like, it was interesting how interactive the three bands are as well, because for the longest time I had them up more in the 11 to 1 o'clock zone. And then I was just like, what happens if you put them all on 10? It sounds equally awesome in a different way. It sounds explosively awesome, but it's still balanced properly, which was kind of a nice surprise. But going into it, for channel 1, I kind of didn't want to leave channel 1. I just like kind of zoned out, and the volume knob on the guitar just gave it infinite possibilities. It is incredibly dynamic to the touch and to volume. So you could have that channel as gained out as it gets, and then go all the way to crystal clear really easily, all the way up to almost like an Angus Young kind of thing. Definitely like a Tom Petty, Mike Campbell sort of world. And then I think the channels dovetail really nicely. So it goes from channel 1 and then it just takes off from there. And that's a really interesting channel because it's not metal. And the first thing I do is see how metal things can go. And it's not yet. It's super modern and can be super aggressive. And to me, I like that a lot because being a metal kid, when I was a kid, like if an amp beckons you to go metal, I go metal.
You have to beckon the call. To quote,
that's right. Yeah, you gotta do that. But my clients don't want that necessarily, and it's not something I'm trying to do. This amp can go aggressive, and you could get like I was talking to John earlier. You could get like Paramore and Muse and like bands that are current, Arctic Monkeys and stuff. All of those colors, all of the gain you could possibly want. It doesn't push ever into I don't want to use a negative term. I'm going to use like a nerdy dorky metal thing. It never goes there. I mean, it stays cool. It sounds really cool to me. And that's really important in an amp, especially for work amp. When you're out there trying to sell yourself as a player and what you're bringing to the tonal palette and the paints, the colors that you bring to the party.
Yeah, no doubt about
it. Sense of cool.
Yeah, if I could, I'd like to chime in here real quick on that because you said something. Yeah. So I'm gonna tell you about how I feel about the amp and just speak to what you just said, Michael, and well said. But also want to frame it with potentially giving away a little secret sauce here. This makes Nash nervous. Okay. So and this and that's a little. I don't know if secret sauce is the right term, but I'm going to tell you a little bit of how we go about doing our demos. So we'll have an amp like this or a product that will, an opportunity will present itself to do a demo. And usually it's timely like this was, right? The truth is that Nash and I, as well as pretty much everybody in this company, we're family owned and operated. And so, we're a small business, and so we're all wearing a lot of hats, and I'm sure you guys are all wearing lots of hats too. I mean, driving a forklift and making, keeping the communication about a great brand like Bad Cat. It's two jobs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being said, we're all wearing a lot of hats and we'll have, okay, we need to do this demo and we'll kind of talk about it. When we talked about it, it was like, how is this completely different from the Black Cat was kind of the first conversation that we had, because that was just like looking at it on paper. That was like, okay, that's a concern, And so let's just speak to that. Let's not even run away with it. I'm going to say something about that. But the truth is that when we set this stuff up, there's not like this hours and hours and hours of planning. No. Yeah. Literally I'm thinking about, what am I even going to play? And usually in this case, there's this song by a band called We the Kingdom called God is on the Throne. And I had heard that, and it's been playing, it's a song that I just have on a playlist. And so for whatever reason, I was just kind of farting around in the key of D the other day, just sitting in my house. And that's just started to come out. And I was like, oh, okay, let's just go ahead and try to work this out. And in the second pass of that, when it does it again, there's a lick. Hey, Tim.
We've added another. Ladies and gentlemen.
Guitar player.
Tim Pierce.
So is it just this crew, or is there like a huge audience out there?
There's an audience across YouTube and Facebook Live watching.
Okay. All right. That's what I thought.
I think you probably know most of these people, but let me take a moment to introduce Tim. I know you know Peter.
Yes.
Do you know Michael Nielsen?
I do know Michael. Yes.
Excellent.
Hi, Tim.
All right, and then we got Nate and Nash from Palin Music.
Howdy.
Hey,
How's it
Tim.
going, man?
Nice to meet
Yeah,
you.
and Kyle Rowe. Kyle is actually the one who administers the Bad Cat Facebook group and community, and he's cultivated that all himself, and he manages that from his home in Brampton, Ontario. Did I say it right? Brantford.
Yep.
Nice
There
to
it
meet
is.
you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, and yeah, so we were just talking about the videos that Nate did and Michael did, and how Jet Black seemed to sort of inspire different takes on itself, just in the hands of different players.
Yeah, it's unusual for me because I fell in love with the Clean channel and I started using it 100% of the time after the moment you brought it to me, John. John brought it to me maybe 6-8 weeks ago, and I started using it 100% of the time. I have gone back now to the Hot Cat for some things because that one really suits me too. But there's something about the Clean channel on the Jet Black that is so big. It's funny. It's like a combination of a Marshall and a Fender and a Vox, which I love the clean sound of a Plexi Marshall. I love the clean sound of a Fender before it breaks up, and I love just the top end, the edge on an AC30, and it seems to provide some of those things. But I think that's sort of the Black Cat sound. I mean, the Bad Cat sound in general. You guys always seem to go for this really modern thing, which is a combination of my three favorite amps. But I'm just hooked on the Clean channel. I use pedals with the Clean channel all the time.
Well, the thing that's funny about that to me is that when we were developing that amp, I remember telling Peter, like, oh, this is like I always jokingly refer to it as my Billy Duffy amp. Because I listened to a lot of the Cult when I was a kid. I just love it. And he was an AC30 guy and a Marshall guy. And so I find that on that second channel, I can really dial that in. Lo and behold, I bring it to you and you're like, dude, the Clean channel.
Yeah.
And I brought it to Michael, and Michael was like, I'm like, Michael, listen to the second channel. Listen to the second. And he's like, oh, he's just going through the volume control on his guitar in the first channel. I couldn't get him off of it for an hour.
Well, and Ben Eller sent me a piece of music that he played through the second channel that was phenomenal. The second channel lit him up, So it's all there for me to discover. But to me, the Clean channel is phenomenal, and I use it. Been using it 100% of the time. Now, I just said the last couple of days, I kind of slipped back into the other one, into the Hot Cat, but then I fired this one up again. It's just got this robust low mid and bottom end that's really nice. Right. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Peter's probably thinking the same thing. He was talking earlier about building an amplifier that sounds good recorded, like right out of the box. Whereas you take some of the classic amps and they take some refinement and some shaping to get them record ready. Did you find yourself that something about the Hot Cat just translates to tape? Is that what it is that you like about it? It's just kind of a curious question from me.
Well, I love that you said tape because I have to stop myself from saying the radio these days. The answer is yes. I mean, there's a certain kind of amp that you'll find that Nashville players predominantly gravitate towards, where it's just it for me, it's a sound that is at the edge of breakup, and it's not clean, but it reads clean. What that means is there's enough gain to where it starts to compress and even out. Like a dead clean sound, not always useful unless you're playing Nile Rodgers kind of parts, but a sound that reads clean, that you can actually make dirty by hitting it harder with your pick. Those are good recording sounds. So in that sense, you've set these amps up perfectly for that. I mean, and this channel. See, if I play quiet, it seems pretty clean, but then I can also go. So in that sense, you guys have designed good recording amps. It's that zone where the amp is gained up, the amp is alive, and it begins to compress naturally. But these days, and it may be an age thing, you know, I used to wonder why all my favorite guitar players started to use less and less distortion as they got older. I'm kind of getting there. It's like I don't like too much, you know, gain. I mean,
I think what it is, to me at least, often is that for some reason you want to have the impression of kind of like sustain or give from the amp, but if that can be delivered by not being as distorted, but more clean with more headroom, that's kind of like the perfect spot. So it's where you actually have enough under your fingers to control it and that it doesn't immediately decay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for me, that's what I like. I mean, I also like playing a sound that's fully gained up for soloing, where you can, you know, just let it sing, like, you know. But most of the work I do is in the Edge of Breakup world.
I have a question for Tim, if I may. Tim, on your channel, you've shown an MXR Bradshaw Boost that you have. Is that something that's always on? Or
No,
oh.
no, there's no pedal I have that's always on. But anytime I'm playing a solo, I choose some sort of overdrive or gain pedal, and they're all the mild ones. And certainly the boost line driver from MXR is great because it's basically a micro amp that's been upgraded. And all it does is give the amp more gain without making the amp sound different. So I will use that, but then I'll also switch maybe to one of my old ODR ones. Now, George Trips, can you see all this? Is this okay here?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So George Trips and I are working on just a slightly more, just a little better version of the boost line driver. So that we're going to get that going soon. But here I have the ODR one I use, and then my friend made the Karma ODR 10, which is a clone of the ODR 1. Noble's just sent me this, which I don't know if it sounds like the ODR 1 or not. And then, of course, you guys have seen this guy, which I think is really good too, which is... So I always choose, and then the Shanks ODS 1. I have favorites when it comes to pedals.
Do you think about them in terms of I'm playing through an EL84 amp, it's going to be these, or I'm playing through a EL34 amp?
I can't remember stuff like that. I've never been that guy. I can't remember what tubes are in my amps. I can't remember what pickups are in my guitars. It's not something I'm proud of. I am not bragging about it, but I always think of, oh, that sounds good. Oh, that sounds a little, you know, it's just a more immediate step on something.
How did you do that when you had to? Sorry, how did you do that when you had to reproduce sounds in a live context? I know you've been doing mostly studio work, but
yeah, I gave that up at a certain point, and partly because of that, I think. Yeah, it was never one of my strong suits. So I always wanted to be in the laboratory. When I used to tour, I will not get us off track, I promise. But when I used to tour in the 80s, I was on stages with Rick Springfield, and I always felt like this is not where I should be. I need to be in the laboratory. And so I gave all the live stuff up.
That's interesting. I feel the same. I actually was always preferring more work in the studio, and also partly for that reason, because it's for me very much in the moment, and reproducing something later on, which I did at a certain point, is to me less interesting. I just want to always kind of move forward and see what else is out there, you know, something else to find, which is going back to like how does it come that the Jet Black ended up totally different than the Black Cat? So there you go. It's always trying to find something like a new voice for a particular purpose.
I also have a question for Peter, if I can. Did I interrupt you, Nate?
Go ahead, and I'll jump in after if that's all right.
Peter, when you're designing amps, do you have in your head some old classic amps that is the one, like an AC30 from that you heard, you know, when you were a kid, or a particular Marshall or something like that?
Not really. not really. I mean, I have sometimes a certain a song or something like that sparks an idea. But it's probably also because I heard that many amps in my life. Before I used to, or before I started designing, I actually repaired and modified amps, like so many of our small professional group. And and I have the impression that by now I have just like a huge library in my head. And when I'm going for something which is usually derived from a concept or starts with that concept, then that I automatically associate a certain sound with it. So I have a concept for an amp. I know what kind of sound I'm going for, but I always put it in the way that I want to get the essence out of something. So what I mean by that is, when I hear a great Marshall sound and someone would ask me what do you want to do with that sound? Just take it to another place. What I would do is dial in the amp the way, like what we call, what's actually the sweet spot, and then look at it like, okay, this kind of sound I want to have accessible at all volume levels, at all gain levels. And I don't want the underlying sound or the overshadowing sound, however you want to put that, I don't want that to change. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's usually my approach when I start designing anything, no matter if it's an amp or right now I dug deep into some other stuff. So
I love that, and that kind of is a beautiful framework for what I'm about to ask. I don't know why, but at some point when when we were just talking about doing demos and how, you know, we kind of throw them together pretty quick. And one of the things that we sort of evolved into is I just turn the amp everything at noon. You know what I mean? And for whatever reason, like if I can't find, if I do that and there's not like a killer sound right out of the chute, I don't mean to feel this way, but I tend to feel this way. It's like I can't really get into the amp as much. And on this amp, when I just put everything at noon, it was just like, well, this freaking thing sounds awesome, you know, just like this, you know, and which, and I would love to get Tim's take on that, like how you approach. Same thing with you, Mike, and also Peter. Like, did you design this? Like, this has to just sound killer with everything at noon.
yes, of course.
Yeah, I found that the best amps, you can actually have the knobs just in an unknown position, like you just grabbed it from your friend who borrowed it, and you bring it home, you turn it on, and oh, I didn't realize it was like this, and it still sounds good. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. And for me, it is usually the sounds that are in the middle. You know, it's like this or like this, right? You know, and I have felt at times like I'll be playing and I'll take an amp off standby, and I've never heard it before. As the amp warms up, I know immediately that it's a great amp just because of what you're talking about. It's the simplest thing in the middle that lets me know. So I agree wholeheartedly.
Yes, it's like this effect. I used to, or the first time actually at a concert where I heard a sound check. There was a really good drummer, and he hit the snare just once for the sound check. And I was like, oh my God, you immediately knew that's a good drummer. I don't know. I mean, Where does that come from? Someone kind of immediately has the feel for something, right? So
it's the sound of authority. When you hear somebody playing and they have authority in their hands, and you just like, they don't have to play anything complicated. You can just tell that, you know, they've not only played in front of people, but they know how to put spirit in the room.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking, you just used a great word, and I wanted to interject for about 10 minutes, but everybody's so interesting. So in the spirit of spirit, as we like to call it, Nate and Nash actually have an announcement. Their company does this great thing called Blue Friday, And I want them to go ahead and tell the people who are watching right now, because you people are going to probably want to head to the website after this chat's done and sign up for this. Nate, take it away, bud.
John, you're a good man. Thank you for that. I'll be quick. So there's a lot of people doing big deals and big sales on the Friday after Thanksgiving. What we wanted to do something different. And that day for us, it's called Blue Friday, and it's about giving, it's about gratitude, and it's about just showing our thankfulness for, we've been doing this since 1963. So we've been in business for 60 years. And so what we do is we have some big giveaways. And if you're watching this on Facebook right now, you're going to want to go to Palin Music's Facebook page. There's a post, and the post is super simple. It just says, tell us something you're thankful for. Could be family, could be friends, could be both, could be music, could be people doing cool Facebook streams talking about cool amps, whatever, right? You put that on that post, and we have a third-party software thing that picks out random names, and we're going to be giving away a bunch of really cool gear, guitars. We're going to give away some band instruments, and we're giving away a one-of-one Bad Cats Jet Black in Palin Blue. And so we're giving that away on the Friday after Thanksgiving. That is Blue Friday. It starts at 9 a.m. Central Time. So you're going to want to chime in on that. It's all live. Nash will be on that. We'll have some other special guests. And thank you, John, for allowing us to talk about that.
Oh, man. No, I think you guys are awesome. I'm glad that you're doing something just a little bit different. It's good for the whole community.
We should have named it the Jet Blue for you guys.
I think there's already something called Jet Blue, isn't there?
Is there?
Maybe. Yeah,
That
maybe.
looks amazing.
Oh, yeah. Can you guys get a close up on it with that blue?
Sure.
That's like probably one of my dream Bad Cats in that color.
Yes. And I don't know if you go to our
Here,
Facebook.
I go back to it. I just enlarged you. You're the star of the show.
Look at that.
Yeah, that's
and it's got the silver sparkle.
Yeah, the sparkle grill's not really translating, but trust me, that it's a sparkle grill and it looks sick.
yeah, you can kind of see it. It's
There it goes. That's better that way. Yeah.
Sharp.
Fun fact. We did a post advertising Blue Friday. You can find it on our Facebook page. And we found blue face paint that I painted my whole head the color to match that amp. True story. It's out there for consumption. Enjoy.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
Guys,
now that I derailed everything.
That's awesome.
No, I gotta ask you guys, how do you like the knobs? I mean,
The feel of the knobs. That's so funny you say that, because there's a guy named Jordan who also works, and he does a lot of our videos. In fact, he was the guy that convinced me to put blue face paint on. But the knobs have they got a good turn on them. You know what I mean? It's nice and smooth, and I don't know. I started to call it Tennessee whiskey. We'll go with that. It's nice. Yeah.
Is that a special thing? How do you do that? How do you make them feel that good?
now that's actually the pod itself, but I also think the knob also translates so much, right? I mean, if the knob looks right and feels right, it's like Tim, I think you have one of the first prototype models, right?
He has one of the newer ones.
No, not John. Somebody sent me the right one. I have two.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I gotta come bail the old one out.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I might keep the old one just for superstition. Give you this one back. I don't know.
Fair enough.
That is the one. I think the one you had, Tim, at least the first one, there was, or you still have it, right?
Oh yeah, I still have it. Yeah.
That is a little different in the circuitry.
It is a little different. So I'll need a few more months to evaluate the two.
Take your time.
That's an interesting thing to ask, though, Peter, because when you think of an amp, you don't think of tactile sensations typically. But that's such a big thing for me, man. Like,
of course,
when I'm taking something out of the box, especially a lot of customers, if they can't play it in store, they're going to order it online. Your first impression is, how does the handle feel? And then how did the knobs feel when I'm turning it? Little things like that. It's like slamming the door on a Rolls Royce and having that soft thud. Like those little things. It has nothing to do with the bigger picture, but it does.
let's face it. That is one of the things I think what makes analog equipment still valid in our world. So the direct kind of like interaction with a piece of equipment which gives you immediately just what you are actually dialing in. I think that to me is a very important thing when I want to get to a good sound. And that to me will, I think, always have validity in our world. So I don't think that it's going anywhere, no matter how good digital equipment is, which it is. And I love digital equipment at the same time. So it's always just about okay, what's the right thing for this particular purpose.
Yeah, there's a nice weight to these knobs, like a heavy watch or something. So you did good with those.
It instills confidence immediately, or it doesn't. That's with knobs. That's definitely an important thing. I had a weird question for you, Peter. So a lot of consumers aren't aware that like TMB tone stacks are cut only. So people, as we said, immediately always go right to the middle position, which is not technically flat. Do you think manufacturers have deliberately started to shift towards almost changing the parameters at noon because they know everyone thinks that's flat?
I think so. I mean,
That's a really good question.
The thing with flat EQs is that no passive EQ is ever flat.
Not completely flat. There's a built-in shape, but
yeah,
you know what I mean, though. Everyone immediately goes to noon, and I've talked to so many people throughout the years that are like, the middle position when all the knobs are at noon is flat, and it's like, it's not. But then again, I was wondering, since so many people do that and so many people think that, if that's changed the way amp designers literally set up their tone stacks, because it's like, we're designing this for human error. Like, we're having to think about what people don't know versus what they do know.
The tone stacks, for the most part, look relatively similar. So there is rarely a compensation for that. But what amp designers do is often pre-shape, so to speak, before the signal actually enters the tone stack. So the most guitar amps have a passive tone stack. Very few come with a Baxandall, but that is usually also not an active Baxandall, which I think makes it, technically speaking, I forgot the name of the guy who invented that. James, thank you.
James.
There you go. Yeah. So I'm not sure if people designed the tone stack specifically for that. I actually don't think so. It's more about, I did that with the Bad Cat once, especially with the treble knob. I set it in a spot where I feel like that's the right sweep for it. Technically speaking, which is the mid knob on the Jet Black is actually the treble part in other circuitries. So the way I implemented that is different and depends on the load of the tone stack. Anyways, that might get a little bit too technical, but so I switched it around in order to get to this characteristic of the EQ.
So I want to interject for a second. We have a user or a viewer question. It's on the screen now. Michael asks the question, Peter, besides the 4 EL84s versus the 2, does the Jet Black sound different from the Black Cat?
Yeah, significantly.
So you did a channel 2 revoicing for sure. I don't know how much you did in channel 1, and you don't have to give away trade secrets, but
no, it's not so much about the trade secret. It's like the channel 1 changed as well. So both, I would say the more drastic change, so to speak, or alteration is in the second channel, but the first channel as well. So I think if I have to put it in words, I'd probably say is bolder or more like a more like a slap in the face. I would describe generally the Black Cat more as super smooth sounding. It never gets nasty in a way, whereas the Jet Black can get rough or nasty in a way, in a good way, but it's just like more a rock and roll amp rather than, if you put it in genres, the Black Cat is more like funk, soul, pop, whereas the Jet Black is more like a rock amp, right?
So, I like what Tim said a second ago. Tim, you were talking about it's almost like a Vox Marshall Fender kind of came together in that first channel like that.
Yeah, and it might be just a lazy thing to say. As I was saying it, I was going, well, that's like, saying I like millions of dollars or something. It's like I have my 3 favorite amps in the world, but that really is what I hear. I mean, it's got the there's something about a Fender sounds a little like cheeks full and like this. And then my old Marshalls have that sag in the transformer. So when you play a chord, you can hear it kind of sag. You know what I'm talking about. And then the Vox has the Blizzard of Nails thing on the top, and it's got all those. So I stand by that. Yeah,
I agree with that. In fact, the thing that when we turned it up and just literally out of the box, out of the chute, it was like, wow, here is chime and harmonic bloom shaking hands.
There you go. Yeah.
That's all music to my ears, guys. Thank you. I love to hear that you love it. That's ultimately what you can ask for when you design, no matter what, right? I mean, when you guys write music, that's the kind of like the best reward.
Well, and the great thing about your line is there are virtues to all of these amps. I mean, the Lynx is sitting back behind there, and there'll be a day when I have the Lynx up here too. That's what it's called, right? The Lynx. Yeah. Okay. I was afraid for a second. I was calling it the wrong thing.
Is that the high gain one?
Yeah, and when I was talking about, I mean, Michael, you're an expert at high gain sounds. The high gain channel on that is incredible, and so your whole line, you have different kind of flavors for people. So it's hard to name one. And as I said, for 6 weeks, I've been using the Jet Black only, and then I went back to the Hot Cat for some reason. I said, oh, I remember why I like the Hot Cat. Oh yeah, it's there's a little difference that are hard to put into words, but you guys make musical sounding amps. I would encourage people to try different ones if they can, get them into the local stores. I have a store near me that has Bad Cats. It's Angel City Guitars. It's so cool.
Yep. Ole.
Yeah.
Great guy. We're going to see him. I think we're going to see him in December. We're probably going to be in store and just do like a Bad Cat taste test. What do you call it? Like a tasting, I guess we'll say. I don't know if there'll be. Yeah, we should do some sort of a thing like that. But I just meant in general, we'll have all of the product line up there so that people can come in and kind of taste test the amplifiers.
It's interesting. I mean, how? Yeah. Now I am interrupting you, but I just had how does somebody just buy something, direct order without hearing it? How do you guys get people to hear your amps? I guess videos, sound examples.
Right. Basically, yeah. Nate and Michael. I think these days, guys are more than content, like listening to YouTube, regardless of the fact that there's odd compression factors and stuff.
Right.
And they just go, that's for me. And then they place their order, with any number of retailers that we work with. And
heck, I do that too. Yeah.
I'm certainly guilty of that with pedals and things like that. I don't think I've ever personally purchased an amplifier online, but I've definitely done it with guitars. I've definitely done it with pedals. So I'm just guilty as anybody.
There's an interesting comment. The Lynx is a do-it-all amp for me as an FOH guy.
Huh.
As a front of house guy.
Yeah.
I'll also say the Lynx probably has the best built-in noise gate. I mean, name me another amp that's got that great of a noise gate.
There's actually a slight modification to the noise gate. which we implemented a while ago.
Of course.
I mean, that's how things go. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, you have to go back to this crazy year. I mean, the last year, 2022, when I started October 21, and so all of 22 was designing day and night. I mean, it was four M's. We actually got those 4 M's from blank sheet to production within 12 months. I mean, it's a crazy program. So I lost my train of thought totally. Where were we?
Well, it's you constantly do have to kind of upgrade stuff.
Yeah. So of course, in such a short amount of time, there are, especially then, there are things where you're like, you can improve on that, you can improve on that. So the journey goes further, and there we go. So when I find time in between to actually address some of these things, I'm go almost back to the drawing board. No, not quite.
I want to throw out there
So-
too. The Lynx is easily kind of labeled as a high gain or metal amp, but Tim, your demo of that had the sweetest, like classy mid gain bluesy, just like you coaxed some lower gain stuff out of that just my jaw dropped. It was glorious.
Well, thank you. I'll have to go back and listen to it. It's funny how we always seek our sound. No matter what you put into your hands, you always bend it into your sound somehow. It's funny. That's probably what happened. I'll go back and watch it again.
But I agree, Michael. I totally agree with you. I think we don't do the Lynx justice if we just call it a high gainer. I mean, obviously, I was going for high gain as well. I wanted to. I had something specific. I had a specific goal with it. But at the same time, I think, you get to a lot of gain by adding gain stages and putting them at the right spot. But if you actually just cascade gain stages and don't compensate each individual stage to the right point, then you end up with something what people often perceive as, well, it's got this one good sound, but the other is kind of like lack, or right. With the Lynx, I actually wanted to have the whole spectrum. I mean, if you turn down the gain on channel 1 in the low mode, you get to a clean sound. And I wanted some sort of clean sound in it, just not this sort of smooth like it is in the Bad Cat, but more something what we often hear, for example, from old Plexis. Why people also love old Plexis clean, because they just sound great if you don't push them too much. Then you got this super punchy and a little more aggressive clean sound than you get from a Blackface, right? So it's a total valid clean sound, just a different character.
Here's a really difficult question for you. I think it's when I read it, I think it's difficult, but you might have a different take. Session Solos is asking, in a world of modelers and rapid pace of technology changing, how has the approach to amp design changed, say versus 20 years ago? And I know that's kind of like a theory question, but I guess if I was to rephrase that in a way that might be easy to answer, it's how has your design approach changed, knowing that you're in the face of all these people switching from tubes to modelers, and knowing that that's kind of your competition now?
I agree. That's a very interesting question, which I am the wrong person to ask, because I actually designed my first product 11 years ago. So I can't speak of to 20 years. How did it change? How did it change for me? I think I use all sorts of technologies, regardless what it is. I actually don't really care in that sense if it's a tube or a transistor or an op amp or a digital technology. It's all about the goal. What do I want to achieve, and what is the best concept to get there? So I don't shy away from adding digital parts in a circuit if it's necessary, and I will certainly continue with that. Just because some people want to keep the signal path purely analog or purely tube related. I mean, nothing wrong with that, but it's just not my approach. So I rather embrace the digital technology, I guess that's what I'm saying, than kind of see myself in a battle with it.
I think that's a great answer.
I think the digital side always follows. And I don't need more than one good sound out of an amp. But in the world we live in, I mean, if you're on stage with an artist, you do have to produce all of these sounds that were on the record. So I get that. I get why you need to have all the versatility that comes out of a digital. I love digital products, by the way. I have a Fractal sitting here, and I like the Tonex, but I mean, I still hear the difference. Amps still sound better to me, hands down. And the thing I tell people, well, if an amp sounds 5% better, like if a modeler gets up to 95% of the sound of an amp, we all live in that top 5% above that 95%. So everything we seek and we want, and the sounds we want to make are above that high standard of 95% that all these modelers get. I still love them. I don't know. I mean, I think the digital world will always follow the analog world, and I look at your amps more like a modern hybrid of, like I said, the great amps that have been made, you know, the three different animals that are the classic ones. You know, and I never expected to be a bad cat user, ever. And now I mean, my favorite amp for like the last 20 years was Frederick's Divided by 13 RSA 23. And he will not be, you know, he wouldn't be sad if I said this, but I don't use it right now because I just use bad cats for everything. I mean, I hate to, I never expected to do. I know I took us off track, but if we're on a Facebook live stream, why not say that? You know, it's like I never, you know, what.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That is a beautiful compliment. I'm so happy about that. I mean, you know, I think with guitar sounds, it's like I just love all sorts of guitar sounds. There is not something where I'm like, it's not there. There are so many good guitar tones out there, but at the same time, I think like there are also so many good guitar tones still to explore or discover. It's not that it's stopped just because we have already so many great ones. And sometimes I feel that our industry in general is a little bit too traditional, and I would wish that sometimes the approach is a little more bold and forward thinking. There's nothing wrong with recreating great sounds which are not available anymore, which can't be built anymore. It's all valid, but there's too much emphasis on that from my perspective.
If I may, on the digital thing, which just observation, it's funny, you could buy 4 different digital high-end modelers or whatever and call up the same amp and they all sound different. So it's kind of like, all right.
Yeah, but you know, I once read an interview with, I don't remember who it was. It was an actual a big record producer, and he said, so one of the challenges he sees for himself, but that is also contributing to the creativity, is that when he goes to different studios, that all the mixing desks are kind of like half working and half not. Some channels work, some not. So you have to work around it. And I get the convenience part that a band who's touring wants the same sound every night and stuff like that, and it makes perfect sense. But at the same time, I feel often these workarounds bring us on different paths, and that adds something to the equation which is unpredictable. And I like that. I really like that. I mean, some of the design stuff or the results I came to were just out of mistakes, right? I end up like thinking I have this or that component in it, and noted that noted it wrongly. And then later on, I get the prototype, the following prototype, and I'm like, why does it sound different? You know? And then I'm like, oh, it's actually cool. So, and then it goes into a different direction. I kind of like this unpredictability in things.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, we play. If you think about guitars, just the instrument as its own form of technology. We play on a hey. Who you got there? That's the real person running the show right there.
A little guitar player.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
this is Harrison.
Hey,
Harrison.
Harrison.
Hello.
Hi.
Everybody.
I got a nephew whose middle name is Harrison. That's a good name.
Oh, really?
Yep. I was just going to say, you know, we play on a technology that was designed by somebody in the 50s, you know, and it's moved forward a little bit and it's advanced a little bit, but for the most part, you know, Fender and Gibson, I mean, they knocked the cover off the ball way back when. And that being said, I love your answer, Peter. And I'm not just saying that because we're on a, you know, Bad Cat live stream. It's a good answer. It's like you gotta hold on to the past, but you can't be drugged back into it. You got to keep moving forward. And that's good because I really don't think tube amps are ever going to go away for the simple fact of just look at guitars. I mean, is a Telecaster ever going to be like, nope, we don't need that anymore, or a Les Paul? No, I mean, it's always going to be around. Will there be different modifications and different variations? Of course. That being said, you know, every young guitar player needs to stand in a garage with their amp cranked, feel their pants leg being, you know, shaken and blown in the wind by the sheer raw, you know, just veracity of the amp. You got to have that, right? And then once you have that, you're hooked. And here we are. All of us have had that, right?
For sure.
So that's an interesting thing you bring up because I think I had this conversation with you, Tim, where I was like, the thing I love about an amp is the experience of being in a room with it and having it shake my chest when I hit a note. And you were saying, yeah, but my cabinet's in an isolation booth and I hear everything through the monitors. And for me, it's got to be this other experience. So it's really interesting that, you know, the guy that's been on every record ever has a totally different take on what he wants to experience than me, who I'm still dragging my knuckles on the ground when I walk.
Okay, so I fell in love with Marshalls at an early age, and I started listening at high decibel levels in my teens, and I really should be deaf right now. There was a certain point, the reason I have this way of listening to amps is there was a certain point, it really happened in the 90s, where I would not listen to an amp in the room with it because my ears became too sensitive. It's really kind of crazy. So, and then my job was always in front of monitors, and the cabinet was always mic'd in another location. Even if I was tracking with the drummer, which I actually did yesterday, I actually was in the control room. But even if I was with the drummer, the cabinet was elsewhere. That's just the way it works in the studio, right? You guys all know that. So I love the experience that I had when I would hear somebody using a Marshall and you can play one note and you feel one note in your chest. That's really it. You play with an amp in the room and you feel it in your chest. There's nothing better than that. But at a certain point, I had to give that up because my ears just, I really should be deaf at this point. I used to fire up Marshalls and all week long. And it was like, I was in front of them all the time. So I had to stop. Anyway, the main thing, people live in apartments and they live with families and they can't create a soundproof environment for an amp a lot of the time. And that's one of the reasons that modelers are going to keep going and going and going. It's just so convenient to be able to, you know, have your baby sleeping in the other room and be able to get a Marshall sound through headphones.
Oh yeah.
So it's great for that. And then if you're playing with Taylor Swift and you need to, you know, have MIDI sound changes in your Kemper or your Fractal or whatever, or these bands that recreate everything on their records with fractals on the road, it's totally legit, totally great. That being said, isn't it true that the reason Tosin, did you design this amp with Tosin? I got to fill in the blanks. Which is the Tosin amp?
Yeah, it is. There is no Tosin amp yet, but
Okay.
We're working on
Okay.
that.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
No,
Aren't
He
bands
is using this one though.
okay? So
Yeah.
I'm hearing this. You guys check me on this. Aren't bands giving up their modelers and starting to use amps again in some degree? Is this true? Is this happening?
Well, it certainly happened with him. There's
That's what I'm saying.
others that, yeah, there's others that I hear from. You know, and I'm sure that there's plenty going the other way too.
I was going to say, like,
yeah, I was sorry. I was just going to say I had a conversation. I don't know if you guys know the old band Skid Row. They were around forever. I was having a guitar conversation with one of their guitar players, and he was telling me we're getting ready to do a bus tour, and I want to take out real amps.
Yeah.
Because he was saying, you know, we've done a lot of fly tours over the last couple of years, and we were using Kempers, but he told me I want to use real amps. So I'm like, okay, that's really cool. So, you know, maybe we'll show him a couple, see if he likes what we're doing. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But yeah, I guess it doesn't surprise me that somebody who had experience with amps in the past would yearn to kind of come back to it, because there is that visceral connection and that visceral feeling playing it. But with somebody like Tosin, who kind of started in the modeling realm and then, you know, made that switch, that to me is interesting. And I'd love to talk to hundreds more people that maybe are younger than I am, that have that same experience, and kind of see what they feel when they finally get to turn around and play a loud amp and feel their pant legs blow a little bit. I'm genuinely curious. I don't get to interact with enough of those people myself. I'd be curious if any of you guys ever do or have experienced that, you know, conversation. Nate Nash, you'd probably be the closest to being able to talk to that, because you deal with guitar players all day, every day, who are buying gear.
Mm-hmm.
That's my guess,
So,
anyway.
It's a full-on split. Like a lot of, and what I try to drive home to people, kind of like Peter said, like our industry is kind of centered around traditionalism, and like, you know, we look to the past for all of these high watermarks. But really, you know, as far as retail goes, it's kind of the crucible. It's like this product works or it doesn't. You're listening to the public. And what I've tried to tell people is one isn't better than the other. It's all about application. We obviously have a lot of people who have, you know, they're working musicians that are playing casinos, who are doing church gigs, stuff like that, where stage volume is not an option. So in that situation, you know, and you're using in-ear monitors, there's a lot of benefits to using modelers, because you can really dial that tone in. You can get it to where it needs to be. So there's that. But on the flip side of that, you know, talking about Tosin, I remember I was watching a Beto interview the other day where he was kind of talking about why he started using amps, and he was going on tour with Dream Theater and Devin Townsend, and they were using, you know, amps on the stage, and he was like, it was like a physical presence. It was absolutely nothing like, you know, what I was used to, because he's a very modern guy, very modern player, had zero interest in amps whatsoever. He was proud of, you know, going full on headfirst into the future. And, you know, once he started actually touring with a lot of bands that were using big rigs on stage, it was kind of like what Nate was talking about, the immediacy, the power on stage, where multiple speakers are moving and just hitting you at high decibels. Like there's not anything like it. And there's just a familiarity to a tube amp. It's dynamic, it blooms, it reacts in real time to you, where digital stuff sounds fantastic, but I don't think the feel is quite there yet. It just doesn't feel immediate to me. I could trick you, I could do a recording, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a tube amp and a digital amp. But if you played it in the room, it's a little different, especially live.
Yeah, there it is. It's the experience of it. And it's, you know, music is all about relationships. And when it comes to playing, you know, it's your relationship with the instrument, and that includes the amp. That's a big deal.
It's a little bit like this, like what's happened from the birth of the drum machines in my perspective. So where drum machines became better and better and better, up to a point where you had samples of the individual drums, and now they're starting to record entire beats, because it still makes a difference if one drummer is actually really playing an entire beat, because there is a certain groove which is not consistent. It's not like an algorithm, and I'm sure we can develop algorithms which emulate that more. But I think that is the reason why drums are sounding so real partly today, because they are actually really recorded. And in a way, I feel the same with an amp. Going through a modeler gives you always the same processing, which can be good. It's not even, don't want to put any value on that, but it is the same algorithm. There is no tolerance in it. There is not, there's again, not unpredictability in any way.
There's a customer who owns a Black Cat and a Lynx.
I think Steve Eno was writing earlier.
That's
Hey,
right.
Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
We both have a good relationship with Steve. Steve,
Yes.
we've worked with in the past, and he's awesome. I hope
Yes.
you're doing good, buddy.
Me too.
There's a gentleman who owns a Black Cat and a Lynx, and is asking if he can use his line out without a cabinet load.
No.
I know that answer, but I'll let you go ahead, Pete.
No, you can't. I mean, actually, you won't damage the amp when there's no cabinet connected to it, but in that case, the line out won't work either.
Yeah, the line out is can you explain that? It's taking, what is it taking the preamp
It's taken from the speaker output to represent the truest sound of the amp, for the lack of a better term.
Yeah. So don't do that. If you need to use your line out, keep a cabinet plugged into it.
Or some sort of a
a resistive load, or
can be a resistive load, can be an inductive load, whatever is. We'll slightly change the tone, but as long as you have some sort of load connected, the line out will work.
Absolutely. Kyle, do you do some recording at your place? Yeah, I noticed from the microphone and everything. I have to imagine you do.
Yes,
I do.
Yeah.
I try when I have some time.
How do you manage volumes and stuff like that, being that you've got one of the more classic amps, which is going to be insanely loud, to find a real good sweet spot?
It's tough. I mean, I don't really use like attenuators, but recently I have gotten JHS Black Box, I think it's called, for my matchless amp. And I've been using it on that. But I did a video in the past with the Cub 2 that I have, and it actually, I didn't record at like a really, really high volume. It was actually pretty low. And I used a ribbon mic, and I mean, I recorded it in a basement in my old house.
Okay.
And it, to this day, I still get people messaging me and saying that, like, I want to get a Cub because that sounds so good. But volume wise, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I try not to play super loud, but I want to feel the earth shake and my pants rattle.
The best.
Especially when I got a matchless 4x12 last year, and I want to actually plug the Bad Cat into the 412. But anyways, yeah,
it makes for a good time for sure.
It does, for sure.
So we're coming up on an hour 23. I think we were originally talking about making this an hour long, but we can take a couple more minutes. I want to urge folks out there who are watching, if you have any questions for any of our panel here, it's a good time. Peter can explain anything you need to know about, design or his approach or any of that stuff. If you've got any questions about our products,
another comment on the links. There was another comment on the links.
The last comment on the links was just
you.
somebody saying it sounds really good.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Peter,
that.
there's a digital reverb in the Jet Black. The tremolo is analog, but the reverb is digital. Is that a plate? I can't quite tell. Is it a plate or like a long room?
It's between a plate and a hall, a room, right?
A non-defined.
No, it's a non-defined one. It started as a plate, but it's a little longer, has a little more high end to it or high frequency response to it.
That's
So
why it reminded me of a plate. But the tails are a little different. Do the tails change as you move the reverb up? That was something I was wondering, or is it just purely hearing the effect getting louder?
It's like so often. I can't exclude that, but I don't have it in mind like that. It should be pretty neutral for the most part. Of course, depending on how much level you send into it, the chip reacts a little different, but it has quite a dynamic range. So it should be relatively the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this particular reverb is built in it parallel. Is that correct?
Yes.
So like a send?
So the way it's implemented in the circuit is actually in parallel to the effects loops, to the effects loop.
Really?
Yes. It's in phase, so you don't need to be concerned about any phasing issues, unless the effect device doesn't make any phasing issues, which shouldn't. But when you combine that with a delay, which probably most people will do in the loop, right? Then both effects gonna shine more. I like running those, especially delays and reverbs, in parallel more than when the delay usually hits the reverb, right? I mean, it's again a subjective thing, but when you actually try it with a delay, any sort of, doesn't matter. You can use a digital delay or a tape emulation or whatever. You will notice that it sounds considerably different than when you usually run the delay in front of the reverb.
That's super interesting because it's like almost like the effects loop. It's like you're using an insert on a track and then having a send behind it that you're sending the signal to. That's super interesting. I never would have ever known that if you hadn't told me that. That's honestly something you should tell more people because that's fascinating to me, and I had no idea it worked like that. And
yeah, I like it when the reverb is really just added to your signal.
Yeah,
and not, I mean,
not engulfing
an old Fender with a spring reverb obviously can sound amazing, and that can be part of the sound, but I don't think that suits the character or the purpose of these amps. So and if there is an effect which to me makes sense on an amp, then it's a reverb, as long as you're not going with any sort of high gain where I find it just doesn't match the character. But then it should be very neutral and transparent and just add to the guitar signal, and your guitar signal should always be here, whereas the reverb kind of sits behind it.
Well, that's interesting because actually in our demo, this dude over here loves reverb. Love it. And I do not. I think reverb is horrible. 90% of the time it makes things muddy. This is just me as an engineer, like
I get it.
On stage, like
I'm with you. I gotta drown everything in reverb.
Dude, so I love shoegaze music. I love listening to it, but when I'm like mixing people and stuff like that, it drives me crazy when people want too much reverb because it's like you're gonna get rid of all the dynamics. You're just wanting me to wash it all out. So when we were doing this demo, I was like, it's strange that the reverb is all the way up
Oh,
and
and
it's
all
still
the way up.
it,
It was. I was.
you
up.
had it pretty high at certain points, and it sounded really fantastic, and you didn't lose any dynamics, and it makes perfect sense now that you're explaining it's in parallel.
It's again this analogy to going in the studio. I mean, when I was younger and was working for the first time with a decent engineer, he started putting reverb and delay on the tracks, and I was a little confused. Why? I mean, we was making some rock and roll stuff and punk, and I had what's that for? And then the more we got into the mix, I realized they are totally disappearing, right? You don't actually hear them anymore, but all of a sudden you hear the depth of the recording. You hear actually where the instruments are in the stereo panorama and all that. So without that, you actually even realize that there is a reverb or a delay active. And to me, that was the purpose on this reverb in those amps. Not adding it as an effect like you would add a spring reverb to a
Adding depth.
classic
Yeah.
Fender style amp.
All right. I want to let Benson Russell ask the last question here, and then I think we're gonna wrap this up. Benson's asking, are lunchbox style amps the future for real physical amps? It seems to be what everyone's making. Just curious if amp designers miss working on big 100-watt heads. So it's a two-part.
You know, I get where that's coming from, but I don't. At the same time, I'm working on a 100-watt amp as well, so there's that.
Right.
I think it's always about the like I said earlier, it's about the goal. If I want to have a really good sounding amp, which is transportable and just like a snack to grab, so to speak, then a lunchbox amp is perfect for that. But there's still something about a 100-watt amp which is even valid today. I mean, you don't need to crank it, but it has a certain muscle to it, which you don't get from smaller, low voltage amps.
I would answer it from my perspective that it's not an either or situation. Both of them are incredibly relevant, and moreover, I have from the biggest musical instrument retailer in the country, I have it on good authority that when new products are released, they sell more than 2 times. I think they said more than 2 or more than 3 times the number of heads than they do combos. So that's telling me that people really like full-size heads. The guys who buy full-size heads are going to continue buying full-size heads because there's nothing in the world that feels better to that player, and I am that player, by the way, than big iron. You know, it's like buying an old Mopar. It's buying an old Super B or something like that. There's nothing like the rumble of a 440. It's incredible. So, that's not going to die. But for a guy that wants to have an all-in-one solution with an IR loader and all of that sort of stuff, there's absolutely a growing market for that, and it's going to be sustaining. And I think, for that matter, knowing Benson, you're going to own both. I know you.
So I can just, as a retailer, I've had more and more people actually request 100-watt amps. You know, this stuff is circular, obviously, but attenuators have gotten so good that people can get a high watt, a DR, which is absurdly loud and clean, but can still run it in their apartment because attenuators have gotten incredible. So I don't think that part of it's going to go away either, but I do think you're going to see more lunch boxes because people are just going for the form factor and, something that's easily giggable and you can grab and go with it.
Yeah.
And they can sound amazing.
So
for sure.
I want to advise everybody watching here before we log off. Go and visit Tim Pierce Guitar on YouTube. Subscribe. You're going to get incredible content. not just gear reviews and things like that, but I mean, you've got educational material. He's got tons of resources. You also have a Patreon, yeah, Tim?
No,
Or
but
not Patreon.
I have, it's my masterclass. I have,
Yeah.
It's off world from YouTube, and that's that's the whole thing. It's if
Yeah.
you want guitar lessons, that's the place to go. So, but all roads lead to the same place. So
There you go. Yeah, so yeah, there you go. So yeah, go to Tim Pierce Guitar if you want to know more. You can get to the master classes from there. Also, Michael at Big Harry Guitars on YouTube. It's an amazing channel. And also Palin Music Center. That's the full name of your YouTube channel, yeah? And any gear reviews that you want to see, you'll get to see Nate and Nash duking it out in the videos and chewing on it. And they're always incredibly well produced. So you're going to hear the amp in an idealized situation, which is what you're going to want in your studio. So anyway, I just want to advise all of those, go and subscribe.
Nice to meet everybody, and let's do this again soon. I understand how these things turn into, Dave Friedman's Tone Talk turns into 3.5 hours.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, there's so much more I want to talk about.
Oh, yeah. We could keep going all night.
I talk about this all day. Yeah.
Have a good night, everyone. That was great. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Thank
you.
you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate
See you,
you.
gentlemen.
We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Peter, Tim, Nate, Kyle. Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Yeah.
Pleasure.